Okay, so our first question when we're talking about an economic system is who determines the prices? That seems like such a weird question to ask. But there's really two big answers. There's probably a lot of answers to this, but there's two big answers, at least in modern economies. Who determines the prices? In our system is called the market economy. So who do you think determines the prices in our system? It feels obvious, doesn't it, right? I walk into a store, I don't get to say what price I want. The store gets to say the price, right? So whoever's providing the stuff is setting the prices. But that's not true, because what if they set the price really high and nobody buys it? So in a sense, even though you don't get it like an actual vote, the fact that you walk into a store and buy something or don't walk into a store and buy something is your vote. And so it actually turns out that who determines prices in a market economy is the market. Not the supermarket, obviously, but just this sort of imaginary sort of space in which those who produce stuff and those who buy stuff get together and try to figure out how they make that swap. And you guys probably have seen enough about this kind of thing, the supply-demand curve, that essentially if supply goes up, then price is going to go down. If demand goes up, price is probably going to go up. And so there's some sort of perfect, again, theoretically perfect price at which producers are willing to provide stuff and consumers are willing to buy stuff, and that's sort of the price. It's not like anybody sits down and says, I'm going to set the price. The price is sort of determined by supply and demand. So in other words, another way that we sometimes talk about this is the invisible hand of the market. No one person is sitting there setting the prices. It's sort of the market magically, not magically, but the invisible hand sort of just sets the price. So the idea behind behind capitalism and the market economy is that each person in this system acts in their own interests. So, for example, nobody tells me what I should want. I walk in and say, this is what I want. And so I'm going to, sorry, there's a weed whacker in the background. It's apparently grass still grows on campus even when no one's here. So each person acts in their own interests. So if I want, a hamburger, then that's what I buy. If I don't want broccoli, then that's not what I buy. And essentially, just by everybody going out there and doing what they want, not what other people want, but what they want, that sort of sets us up. And everyone is then better off. So if everyone is wanting hamburgers over broccoli, more hamburgers will be provided than more broccoli. There may be some bad sort of health consequences from that, but economically, that's the most efficient way to sort of do this. And everyone being better off is essentially our definition of economic growth. If what I want is out there, then I'm going to spend more money. And the economy is just a measure of money being spent. So essentially, consumers vote on the supply with their money. If we all want hamburgers, we buy hamburgers, which means people out there try to provide hamburgers. If we all don't want broccoli, or a few people want broccoli, then essentially less broccoli is provided. So is the market driven by consumers or producers? That's a really interesting question. Obviously, from a market economy standpoint, the answer is both. But there's a sense in which not only do I get to determine what I want, but the producers are out there wanting me to want their thing. We call that, for lack of a better term, advertising. That essentially, I didn't even know I wanted this until I saw this ad, and now I want this. So it is driven by both what I want and what producers convince me that I want. I know that's a weird way to sort of put that out there. A big important part about the market economy is this idea of laissez-faire, which just means, it's just a fancy sort of French term for saying the government stays out of the economy. In this whole market of consumers and producers coming together, the government stays out of it. The government essentially provides this safe, protected space where this interaction go on, but it doesn't get involved. It doesn't get involved and say, you know what, I think more people should want this, and so we're going to lower the price in some way, and therefore more people will buy these things. Now, we do know, of course, the government does get involved because there are some things that we think the government wouldn't provide otherwise. The market wouldn't provide otherwise. This is all sort of Adam Smith, 1776, Wealth of Nations. Now let's talk about, are there downsides to this? Are there downsides to a market economy? I want you to pause and I want you to just write down a couple downsides to this whole thing and then come back and I'm going to give you a couple. Okay, so here's a couple downsides to a market economy. One is inequality. I mean, this whole thing depends upon some having more than others. And the longer this goes on, the more that gap is going to increase. So inequality is going to be not just a bad outcome of it, but a necessary outcome of it. So if you don't like inequality, the market economy's got some real problems with it. Another problem it's going to have is what we call market failure. Another way to put this is essentially, if we let the market determine everything, then anything I want should technically be on the table. So if I want to buy cocaine, no problem. If enough of us want to buy cocaine, the price of cocaine goes down. What if I want to buy a human being? Technically, in a free market, I should be able to buy a human being. I can buy anything that someone will provide. And so we would say, well, okay, clearly there's some things that we don't want to have out there in the marketplace, like human beings or, really bad drugs, some things like that. And so the government does intervene in some ways to sort of change what I can or will buy and what producers will provide and can provide. And of course, sometimes we'll say, global warming is a problem, so we kind of think that more people should be driving hybrid cars instead of, gas-guzzling cars. So the government might step in and says, I'll give you $3,000 if you buy a hybrid car. That's the government getting into this. So the government's going to necessarily get into this to provide things the market won't provide. That's market failure. And that raises a lot of questions about when it's okay for the government to get involved and when we don't think it's a good idea and blah, blah, blah. So there are some downsides to this. These are actually pretty big downsides. They can be tweaked a little bit, but the system itself requires intervention to stop those things from happening. All right, I'll come back here in a second and talk about command